I would first like to just point out that obviously the previous panelists have conveyed a wide range of points, so apologies in advance if I repeat any of them. First off, I'd like just to summarize my experience with online learning. I would say that I found it very positive. I've in many ways actually come to prefer it over the face-to-face delivery. So the transition for me was pretty seamless, and I would say that our lectures were either pre-recorded on LectureCast or delivered through Microsoft Teams, and then also for the seminars they were on Microsoft Teams as well. I don't think there were any marked differences regarding the experience of that, apart from the fact that it's online, of course. But it's worth pointing out that, of course, this is probably not the same for all countries, but at my university, pre-coronavirus, much of our education was already digitized. So we used platforms like Moodle and UCL, where we had access to supporting materials, and of course, all our reading list is uploaded online anyway, so we don't really have that need to go to the library and take out books. So in terms of the transition, it was already quite easy to navigate because it's something that we were familiar with. In terms of assessment, so I was a first-year student, our exams were cancelled and replaced with like a self-reflective essay. So it wasn't anything too drastic, but so for my department, second and third year students had their exams transferred into coursework. So it's something they're already familiar with, that's not too much of a problem, but those that were outside of our department, a lot of them still had online exams, especially where their courses, it wasn't viable for them to have coursework. And these online exams were had like a 12-hour time frame, and it was open book. So I'm not sure how many students coped with that, obviously something quite different. And I'm not really sure about the standard of writing that's expected in those exams now that it's open book and now that you have the extended time to complete them. But overall, I would say that kind of this experience has really shown the great technological strides that higher education has taken in the last 2 decades. I don't think this would have been something possible before, and it's forced me to question kind of the value of a traditional degree in today's times. Moving on to the benefits, convenience is a big one. I mean, especially for me, we have 1 to 2 hours of contact time a day. So, you know, traveling into the city for such a little time of interaction seemed tedious to some extent. So I suppose that greater deal of flexibility is valued. Similarly, well, not for me, but students that are living in student accommodation, it's much cheaper. Living in London can be very expensive. So I suppose staying at home really helped in this regard. But there are, I probably start off with the biggest challenge here is, and something that all of you have mentioned already, is that this online learning has really, and coronavirus in general actually, has really illuminated and deepened the socio-economic divides. And so in terms of my biggest concern is with outcomes. Disadvantaged individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds are, of course, disproportionately affected with this transition onto online learning. So unlike their affluent counterparts, they might struggle with finding a quiet space to work at home if they have quite a big household. Maybe they have a role to fulfill as a full-time carer. Internet connectivity, of course, mentioned already, even just, you know, access to a laptop. In terms of my university, there was a limited effort to work around this. There were offers put for such students in terms of giving them laptops if they didn't have laptops, giving them some funding, so bursaries, And they also kept the student centre open, which was for, so I suppose students that weren't able to fly back home or move back home had somewhere outside of their accommodation to work. Of course, social distancing measures enforced, but I guess that helped to some extent. In terms of what teachers could do to make the course more engaging, I think that it's worth remembering that teachers had a short period of time to adapt because of the situation kind of escalated quite quickly. So that we did encounter a few technical difficulties in the beginning, but like links not working, audio issues, etc. But you know, that's something that sorted itself out with time. And I think there's another issue of oh, sorry, I forgot. There were some other challenges I meant to mention. STEM subjects, for example, it's not as easy for them to have online learning. Like, how are their labs going to be conducted? I know that a lot of my friends who are taking science degrees complained about this. Also, time differences, I think, was also mentioned. I had in my seminar an Australian classmate join in just before she was going to bed, whereas I had just woken up. Not something that was ideal for her. And also some support services probably not as readily available. Like, you know, we usually typically have our information desk where we go for timetable issues, submissions, extenuating circumstances, and so on. And also well-being services, so people that need to go and ask for support with anxiety or so on. Probably that, I'm not sure how they found that transition and if that service is as available as it used to be. So, sorry, going back to the experience with teachers, I think so making the course interactive is quite difficult, especially with seminars, because as students, we're not able to kind of discuss the question in groups before we feed back to the class. And I don't think there's much that can be done about that unless there's a new software that's developed that would enable that. Also, there's people are a bit shy, I'm not sure why, but in terms of with feedback during lectures. But I found actually that some teachers have used the messaging feature that gives perhaps students that are typically more shy the confidence to ask questions. So I suppose there's something that can be done about that. But also I think as students, it's on us to make a concerted effort to do group work outside of our classes, to arrange those revision sessions with our classmates. And so that might not be a problem for those that like to work independently, but for those that do better in teams, that is a bit of a setback. I also, just one last thing that I would like to mention, in terms of economic concerns or kind of navigating professional experience that you get from when you do your undergraduate degree. A lot of students have had their internships cancelled, and also some rely on jobs, actually part-time jobs, to fund their studies. So again, we're seeing people that are more economically disadvantaged being disproportionately affected here. Do they have a family to go back to? How are they going to find affordable accommodation if they don't? But the career support from our university has been pretty impressive, actually. They've provided in-house internships for those that have had theirs cancelled, so that they're still able to develop professionally, even with the pandemic going on.